And we're rolling.
You know I'm union, right?
I know you're union.
Or Ken, you know I'm union.
I know you're union. In so many senses of the word.
I'm not even sure my union will let me be on camera here. Hi everybody, welcome to our panel for this Kalamazoo. I'm Mike Kramer, and I have worked with Ken Monshine and the Societas Johannes Hyginus with this series of panels that we've been doing for a few years now called Can These Bones Come to Life? Our panels are inquiries into reenactment, reconstruction, recreation, and the intersection of those with both societal issues and with academia. The subtitle of today's panel is Politics and Diversity in Reconstruction, Reenactment, and Recreation. Our first speaker is Ken Monshine. Ken is a longtime scholar and adjunct at several fine universities in New England. He got his PhD in history from Fordham University. He's the author of many books and the editor of many more. He and I co-edit a series based on these panels. And his new book is entitled Game of Thrones. I have it written down for the other panel. What is it, Ken?
Game of Thrones and the Medieval Art of War.
Medieval Art of War from McFarlane. And his paper today is going to be on reenactment, recreation, and the historiography of imagined whiteness. Ken?
And I've changed the title somewhat, a little bit, to because I'm mainly concentrating on the historical European martial arts movement, though I'm also taking into account recreation and reenactment in the broader sense, but also concentrating on this particular sort of reenactment. So, without further ado, I will now commit internet suicide.
You're laughing, he's serious.
Yes.
We heard about that.
Yes, we all know about this. Medieval history, or rather medievalism, the idea of the Middle Ages, is very much in vogue these days. Medievalist movies, video games, Renaissance fairs, reenactment groups, and live-action role-playing all have become a prominent part of our pop culture, not to mention a lucrative part of a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. The historical European martial arts, or HEMA movement, is no less a part of the zeitgeist than the success of HBO's Game of Thrones or Peter Jackson's Middle-earth movies. For those unfamiliar with it, HEMA is, in brief, the study of sources of personal combat from ancient medieval, early modern, and modern Europe. This academic study naturally bleeds over into physical study, which is why, in addition to being an alleged academic, I am also a jouster and, whoops, where is that? I am also a jouster and fencing master and HEMA teacher and a number of other things. There are a number of young academics working in this field, particularly in Europe, and one journal, Acta Periodica Dilatorum, but it's not likely to show up in any job ads. We are seeking your tenure track professor and must have a field in historical European swordsmanship. We can identify HEMA as an emerging field, or perhaps a subfield, but one dominated by popular, not academic discourse. There's good reasons for playing at the Middle Ages to be politically suspect. Victoria Cooper, then a PhD student at Leeds, summed up the problem at a paper 2 years ago at this very conference entitled Playing Politics, Exploring Nationalism and Conservatism in Fantasy Video Games. Cooper explained how medieval imagery and the idea of authentic national culture could easily be turned to serve right-wing, anti-immigrant political ends. The Middle Ages are, in Cooper's words, gritty, white, male, and powerful, a space where whiteness can be anchored in a happy history where a world is free of multiculturalism and white guilt. Yeah. Cooper's paper is picked up and echoed by medievalist.net and thence from a number of online outlets. And there was a lot of blowback at this, and kind of understandably so, because whereas we can understand Cooper's point in this, People don't like their favorite hobbies attacked by social justice warriors, or have implied that they are racists for engaging in such pastimes. Another example. Let's look at the threats received by Militia DeWalt, whose Tumblr, People of Color in European Art History, documents pre-modern depictions of Africans and Asians in European art. DeWalt has documented and blogged about this harassment at length, so I don't need to really get into it here. Interested parties can simply search on her site. From the other party, Rachel Fulton Brown, who has received a lot of, excuse me while I'm Marco Rubio here, she's received a lot of feedback for her Three Cheers for White Man blog post, and also later her championing of Milo Yiannopoulos. So it really comes from both the right and the left, or what we would call it. I also draw parallels to Civil War reenactment and the recent outcry against Peter Carmichael, a professor of history at Gettysburg College, who is paraphrased, I add, in the Wall Street Journal on June 28th of 2013, calling reenactments an unfortunate distraction from deeper understanding of the Civil War. And the article went on to say he preferred living history encampments where people could hold the musket or eat hardtack, giving them a tangible experience of the past, but best of all were the National Park Service historians. All you need to do is stay in the national park and you'll come away with a very deep understanding of what happened here. Carmichael's statement was decried as elitist in reenactment circles, and rightly so, because regardless of whether or not African American units are properly represented on the Civil War reenactment battlefield, or for that matter, men under 60 years of age and a BMI of 30 are properly represented. Battle reenactment is a spectacle that engages the audience and puts the proverbial asses in seats. Something that we can't really diminish in this age when liberal arts departments are deemed as disposable in the names of measurable learning outcomes. And the outcry against Confederate reenactment is similarly tone deaf, because the stars and bars here depicted amongst Confederate reenactors is a polyvalent symbol. Right? In some circles it's standing for a racial regime, in others it's a piece of proud heritage, and in others an artifact of a troublesome history that must be glossed interpreted, but not suppressed. It's because the reason why this is so is that suppressing it in that way alienates people, and then you don't educate people, but rather they run away screaming from you. This project that I'm embarking on has met with similar controversy. Upon my posting a call for papers on the diversity aspects of medievalism, recreation, and popular entertainment on academia.edu for this conference, a HEMA researcher, I have that in quotes in my paper, posted the following thing that's on the screen on academia.edu. To paraphrase for time, politically correct European self-hatred, the University Museum Entertainment Complex. It's better to be on academia.edu as an independent scholar, but I do not apologize for who I am born, nor for passionate pursuit of an inherently ethnically European endeavor. The presumptuous political diversity aspects of the description are so wanton, it's as if, this is very British politics relevant, an Enoch Powell-fearing, critical theory worshipping apparatchik of European Union wrote it, which is why I'll never be invited to attend the International Medieval Conference. He meant Asian Americans. I did invite him to come speak, by the way. Sorry, Mr. KM, notice the lack of the doctor. Very disheartening. So, to us, right, I can hear from the giggles, the problems inherent in this are implicit and understood. But I'd like to say that other people who are going to be viewing this talk on YouTube, when our very giggles and gasping and sorts of things, are alienated. Okay? Keep that in mind. Okay? That they're not proceeding from the basic knowledge what we have. Okay. So, as academics, we contend with the fact that the Middle Ages are imbued with meaning. Not all of it in tune with the liberal worldview, and this goes way, way back to the beginnings of the story, the beginnings of the study of in the 19th century. For instance, 19th century fencing historians, just out in my own field, like Castle, Gelly, and Bigney, were very historical positivists. History was the march towards the perfection of the late 19th century bourgeois nation state, which we all hate and like to criticize these days. Just as Northern Europeans were superior to Southerners, peoples in colonized lands were more primitive than Europeans. The Italian despots of Jacob Burckhardt were the forerunners of French autocrats, and the European Middle Ages were a dark age that would inevitably cede to the Enlightenment. So this is the famous quote from Edgerton Castle that I like repeating about the Rough and Tudor fighting in the Middle Ages, about the reign of brute force in social life as well as politics, right? Which, of course, we all look at that and giggle. To be fair, he was a 26-year-old Victorian, right, when you wrote that. But what this does is it essentially parallelizes the Middle Ages. They're a more primitive time from which modernity emerged. Other cultures are stuck in the past, which makes them ripe for European political and cultural hegemony. This is one of the uses of the past for empire. It's a colonizable mind space. But when you take this into pop culture history, this is what appeals to many people today, right? This 19th century idea. It's a past that's potent. It's free from the constraints of modernity. It's manly. And you can see this in these binaries that I've set up, which you see everywhere, from the emphasis on medieval longsword in HEMA to the division in the SCA between heavy armored fighting and light fighting in the Society for Creative Anachronism. And this can easily be conflated with the project of locating eternal national character in the midst of time, practiced by Jacques Michelet, by Michelet, practiced by Richard Francis Burton, that rather romantic and troubling figure in the history of swordsmanship. Am I shouting too much? Slow down. Slow down? Slow down. All right. You're lucky I'm getting through this, really. Who talks about the racial origins of the ancient Egyptians and calls the ancient Irish rather savages than barbarians. And this is repeated really throughout history. So this is Wilhelm Fabricius. He was a Nazi diplomat from Austria, and he published, this is sort of a Hitler Youth Boy Scout manual. Here it includes longsword fighting as a good Volkish pastime for the Aryan youth, right? Yeah, well, he's just demonstrating it, right? But it's okay. They're Aryans. And of course, this is ignoring the fact that he is a good Aryan trachea, but it's ignoring the fact that in the 32778 from 1389, our first source. I mean, it has instructions by Andre the Jew, a Jewish master, right? Similarly, this goes into the historiography of swordsmanship. This is Ada Brun Hofmeier, who in her 1963 essay, From Medieval Sword to Renaissance Rapier, Weapon Typology is akin to racial typology. Swords of different peoples, Latins, Germanics, Orientals, etc., have characteristic features as distinct as their supposed methods of fighting. So cultural diffusion that took place in Sicily or the Holy Land, or the fact that the Frankish way of war was the common method throughout Latin Christendom, has no place between her white lines. The problem is the idea of a manlier, purer, more martial Middle Ages is something that fits well with identitist and nationalist sentiments, from Deus Vult spray painted on mosque walls to the hate groups calling themselves the Knights Templar. Such sentiments pop up in HEMA as fringe people attempt to use the idea of European martial arts in the way that white supremacists sometimes use heathenism and other Nordic varieties of neo-paganism as code for racist ideologies. For instance, in a February 2016 Facebook discussion on appropriated martial arts in the HEMA Open Discussion Facebook group, a poster using the falsified username Sean Leonidas Sunderland, and whose profile picture had the neo-Nazi black sun symbol, started a race-based critique of the practice of European martial arts. In this photo, a blunt practice messer, which is a machete-like weapon, is overlaid with a HEMA practice jacket with an Operation Werewolf Totenwolf patch. For those who don't know, Operation Werewolf was the post-Hitler Nazi resistance movement in Germany. Their website claims to be equal parts fight club, strength regiment, motorcycle club, and esoteric order. And of course, the Totenwolf, that symbol recalls the SS Totenkopf. Yet, of course, you won't, and people are very careful about giving dog whistles and not actually explicitly saying these things. So the Operation Werewolf page doesn't actually have any explicit supremacist things. Other examples, Nicolas Bourgeois from Quebec. He has a open tournament in Montreal called Might is Right, after the book by the pseudonymous 19th century white supremacist and social Darwinist Ragnar Redbeard. Frank Doherty, this is a screencast from Frank Doherty's Facebook feed. He's a human instructor in the UK. He's advocated fighting back against Islamicists and declares a rather obsession with the subject. His Facebook feed has a number of things such as, so attacks in central London by Islamicists, a rape in Waltham Abbey by Islamicists. We better start fighting back and soon, otherwise we will wind up like Germany and Sweden. A researcher into, here's another thing from Frank's feed. This is an anonymous comment. I was asked to keep some things anonymous, so I did. This is from a researcher into Middle Eastern martial arts who said to me the following: "I've never ever seen so many racists as in HEMA. The problem is European martial arts. It brings out the worst and attracts many bad people." But of course, the fact is that many, or say rather the vast majority of HEMA practitioners are not racists, and not all of those. But in the same way, just as the vast majority of the mainstream of HEMA will say we are not racists, and I'm gonna maybe complicate that in a little bit. Not everyone who is interested in this stuff is part of the HEMA movement, or what people would say, or the subculture or community. And of course, it's a self-defined community, right? It's a bit of tautology. Oh, we are the community, and when they're not in this, right? So there you go. Who is this guy? I don't know. Here's from Stormfront, right? Anyone else besides me into it? From ironmarch.org, right? Quick search of this. We'll find posts like this, right? HEMA seems cool, but this is another thing, bit of a concern there. Here's some people who are not in HEMA at all. These guys are the traditional workers' party who rally at the California State Capitol in Sacramento on June 16th of 2016, sparked a riot. But you can see here they're employing this idea of European martialism, crosses, shields, things like that. So there's a medievalism here. These guys are not Hemanists, but they're clearly deploying a medievalism, these shields, in the context of their rather right-wing thing. So, I own a T-shirt. I own a T-shirt with an iron. It has an iron cross and a jousting knight saying the original Iron Horse on it. It's a jousting T-shirt. And of course, I'm Jewish. So, just as not everyone who wears a Celtic cross is a racist skinhead, and not everyone who's a Confederate reenactor is an apologist for slavery, we need to not conflate interest in medieval martialism with neo-fascism. So I actually propose the following litmus test: the idea that really, if we're going to do this, then to say really this guy's a fascist. Pretty strict litmus test, right? One, they have to espouse the idea culture is linked to race, something passed down in the blood. It's exclusionary. The practices of one culture are not for another culture. There's a rhetoric of it being threatened and needing to be saved, which you do find a lot in HEMA. A lot thanks to John Clements, who we'll discuss in a moment, and a very deep distrust of the Enlightenment project. Obviously, mainstream HEMA fails this test, right? And again, bearing in mind the tautology of what is what. The danger, though, is that what we do can be read contrary to our intentions, which you as academics understand, but I think a lot of people on YouTube do not understand. So let's look, for example, at Terry Brown's book, English Martial Arts. Terry Brown is not a racist. He just wrote a book called English Martial Arts. But then the question is, how would somebody who is inclined to spray paint Deus Vult on the mosque read this? Another example. This guy is not in HEMA mainstream, but this is Ivar Hafskold, who has a runic martial arts system called Stav. He's married to a Japanese woman. He talks about achieving mastery and peace with the universe. But then, how might this be read by someone who believes that as a descendant of Vikings, they should be worshiping Thor because Christ was a Jew. And you can look at another thing, right? Blood and Iron Martial Arts Club in Vancouver. 2 women on the front page, right? They are open, they are inclusive. But I mean, I myself have misinterpreted what they're doing because Lee Smith, who's the head of the school, if you can see the logo, it's got a death's head, it's got a skull, because Lee's a metalhead, and a torque, right? And various other things that can perhaps be misinterpreted. And maybe Lee just likes these things, but the thing is that it's very, very easy to misinterpret these things. So I won't say, say Lee may have bad choice of branding here, but that doesn't necessarily make him a racist. And of course, John Clements is perhaps, who I'm sure would say he's not a racist, but in his books and his essays, and he is by far the loudest public voice, the one who's on the Rolodex of the History Channel, and on the website of his Association for Renaissance Martial Arts, he's attacked Asian martial arts and Asian traditions as a strategy of differentiation ever since the beginning of his public career in the late 90s. For instance, things about knights versus samurai, or he takes a side swipe at Asian meditative traditions in Meditatio and Contemplatio, the role of personal self-reflection in the study of Renaissance martial arts. But of course, this can easily be read as a dismissal of all non-Western cultures as inferior, which in turn harms the social credibility and the science and the academic credibility of people who are doing serious research into this. The problem is that legitimate but problematic, I'll call this very guardedly, legitimate but problematic views, political views can also be identified with more extreme positions. So there's a prominent chemo researcher in Sweden who asked that I not use his name in this because he does not want to be publicly named doing this. He's well known for his principal opposition to emigration to Europe, specifically Sweden, which he has up on his website, which he has up there for everyone to see. Some of it's in Swedish. Basically, he argues, just to surmise, that the Swedish social welfare state was created because of shared cultural values. Unrestricted emigration of foreigners who hold different values threatens the substance of society itself. Furthermore, he's got grave doubts about the Enlightenment project, including the values of tolerance and democracy. And his answer to this is a sort of postmodern revival of past values. His HEMA practice is therefore part of an overall reactionary worldview that looks to the past as a source of a better and purer ideal. So this is a legitimate political view. I mean, people have the right to vote for Marine Le Pen. People have the right to vote for right-wing candidates, and this is a political movement, one that we may be opposed to, certainly. But he also stopped short of saying there's a genetic basis for some culture, that these people moving to Sweden are, they can never change anything be other than what they are. And that is a photo which I cropped a lot because we shouldn't show a photo of someone's infant child, but he's holding Jack Donovan's The Way of Men. If you know who Jack Donovan is, he's a far-right gay writer who is anti-gay culture and pro sort of anarchist sentiments. So there's a lot of back and forth on the internet about what this meant. He said, well, it's just funny that my baby was holding this book, The Way of Men, but on the other hand, I mean, with kids holding the Quran, that means something different too, right? In sum, we can see that HEMA, like other medievalisms, can give an outlet for some of the same nationalist and xenophobic sentiments that led to the Trump presidency, that led to the Brexit, that led to the Marine Le Pen being the second runner of the French election. And it also gives people with these mentalities a network of potential sympathizers in which those with such lineage can find resonance. And there's also the problem of denial. People do not want to think the worst of themselves or of their community and their network of friends. And as Tom Arecchia posted in this discussion about this paper, when I posted the call for papers, social justice warrior academics like me, and academics in scare quotes, always looking for racism, even if there's no evidence for it. It's not just that. Anything conceivably done by whites against non-whites, even outward expressions of ethnic white pride, are deemed by them to be offensive. If HEMA is indeed an organization for everyone, it must stop this endless race baiting of whites and simply return to promoting a sport rich in European history. This beautiful martial art, which we all love so dearly, can conceivably have a great future. This yoke of anti-white racism can be lifted from it. And we all see the problem with that. I mean, thank you for making my point for me, right? But the problem is that people who make statements like this don't understand that, which brings me to the greater crisis of credibility in of medieval studies in general, which we don't have time to get into. So, in conclusion, what is to be done? Well, certainly actions to be taken on a cultural level, right? As I said, most HEMA scholars and practitioners are not in any way racist. There's a strong Fighters Against Racism group, there's the Racism Tracker, here's the FAR Facebook page. But we need to be very careful in the way our troops our troops and our research is deployed and the way it can be used. We need not engage in apologetics or conduct virtue signaling or race hunting, but I think it's important that people see that this is a thing and be careful about how what we do can be interpreted. What's more, the study needs to be subjected to formal academic discipline. Professional historians will not engage with studies of European martial arts or other medievalisms, and we've considered one of the cardinal sins in the neoliberal academy, which is ignoring market demand. And wherever there's demand, it's going to be met. So are we going to have a shadow world of scholarship that's going to prove particular useful truths? Or are we going to say, are we going to give a chrism to the truths that we want? If we don't do this, we don't only jeopardize the legitimacy of the historical martial arts research project, but in fact the academic standing, the social standing of the academic study of the Middle Ages in the first place. The truth is that the market demand is not going away unless we contend and engage with these polities. Unless we engage with the people who are interested in this stuff, then we lose control of the discourse, and that is the worst thing that can happen, because then the race is simple.
Thank you, Ken, for allowing us to share your internet suicide.
You're welcome. Let's get Lisa back.
All right. We're going to pause briefly while we hook Lisa's laptop onto the projector.
Lisa's old what?
Yeah,
Lisa?
put it on mine. Stack them.
Stackable. Got it.
Have a seat. Come on up here.
Sure. You belong with us.
That's right.
Okay,
It's gone. There you go. Oh my God.
choose the appearance of your display.
Oh yeah. Okay. Just hang up there. There you go.
There you
Good.
go. Okay.
All right. And for our next presentation, I'd like to introduce independent scholar Lisa Evans. She is a longtime participant here at Kalamazoo. Her main focus is usually in textile arts, and particularly quilting, at which she is a renowned expert. But today she is going to be doing a paper, or presenting a paper titled Re-animating the Star-Spangled Golem, the Medieval Roots and Modern Controversies Surrounding a Comic Book Legend.
Thank you. May 25th, 2016 should have been a red letter day for American comic books. Captain America was coming back. Purists might point out that he really hadn't gone anywhere. It was simply that Steve Rogers, the original character from the 1940s, had retired after losing his super strength. However, he was still a presence in the comics. However, 2016 did mark the official 75th anniversary of the character, which meant he would now be restored to his old self. This alone made Captain America, Steve Rogers, the most anticipated comic of the year. Then the book appeared and all hell broke loose as it became clear that something dreadful had happened. No longer was Steve Rogers interested in defending freedom and liberty. Oh no. Now he preferred to fling innocent people out of helicopters while uttering the catchphrase of the neo-Nazi fascists he had always opposed. Hail Hydra. Reaction to this development was swift and not pleased. Marvel Comics was barraged with angry tweets, writer Nick Spencer received death threats, and stunned children cried themselves to sleep. Critics pointed out that temporary heel turns were not uncommon in comics, but this ignored an uncomfortable truth. Turning a character specifically designed to fight fascism into a fascist is not really equivalent to Superman being snippy to his friends on the cover of a 1950s one-off. Or as former NFL place kicker Chris Cluey put it, imagine being so bad at your job that you take a guy developed by two Jews to fight Nazis and turning him into a Nazi. This paper will discuss why a common plot twist provoked such a backlash by examining the origins of Captain America, both as a product of his times and as a modern iteration of the chivalrous knight, the defender of the homeless, and the legendary Golem, champion of medieval Jewry. We'll further analyze the Golem tale for possible insights to his present as a symbol of resistance to tyranny, despite the current comic storyline. Comic books would seem an unlikely source for such a polarizing character. Comic strips have been intellectually respectable for decades, but early comic books were initially dismissed as juvenile trash, thanks to their focus on costumed adventurers brawling with cliched villains. Children loved the mayhem, but their parents were far more likely to be appalled than pleased at the violence, weak scripts, and crude art. Not all adults agree. Superheroes arrived as war clouds gathered in Europe, and according to psychiatrist Loretta Bender, their fight against evil, quote, offered youngsters the same type of mental catharsis that Aristotle claimed was an attribute of the drama, unquote. Even Bender, however, missed the equally crucial point that superheroes were as much an expression of the immigrant experience as Aristotelian values. There is something inherently Jewish about many superheroes, according to comics legend Will Eisner, and little wonder. Almost all the early superheroes, with the main exception of Wonder Woman, were created by immigrant Jews. Their heroes might have been white men with wasp names, but traces of their background inevitably crept into their work. Creators of Captain America were no exception. Jaime Simon, later Joe, raised in a devout Jewish family in Rochester, New York, was convinced of the greatness of America from the day he shook hands with a Civil War veteran who solemnly invited him to shake the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln. His parents campaigned for Roosevelt in 1932, and his school friends included Gentiles and African Americans as well as other Jewish immigrants. Even an early encounter with anti-Semitism was comparatively mild. His boss at a newspaper was a member of a pro-Nazi group, the German-American Bund, but instead he still hired a succession of Jewish assistants. Born in a Lower East Side slum, Jacob Kurtzberg had a much rougher childhood. Battles with Irish gangs, fights against bullies, pneumonia so severe his parents had a rabbi pray over him. It was little wonder that he found escape from the grimness of life by reading science fiction and drawing his own comic strips. Eventually, he became good enough to sell his cartoons to local newspapers, always under suitably American-sounding names. By 1939, he had legally changed his name to Jack Kirby to be the all-around American that Jacob Kurtzberg could not. The 1930s, when the two men met and began collaborating, were a dangerous time. Kirby had grown up beside Russians who fled Tsarist pogroms and was unnerved by newsreels documenting Nazi atrocities. Simon had had less direct experience with oppression, but both men were living in New York when homegrown fascists attracted 20,000 people to Madison Square Garden for pro-Nazi speeches delivered under an enormous portrait of George Washington. Worse was the appearance of the America First isolationist movement after war came to Europe in 1939. America had done little to oppose Nazism due at least in part to anti-Semitism, and as Simon later wrote, the opponents of intervention were all quite organized. We wanted to have our say. But how? Simply rescuing Jews was not reason enough for America to go to war. The time was ripe for a symbol of hope and liberty to counter isolationism and hate, but public opinion was largely opposed to intervention. What could they do? The answer lay in Hitler himself. Simon and Kirby wanted to pitch a new book to Timely Comics, and who better for the villain than a dictator who had everything Americans hated. Simon sketched out a patriotic hero clad in chainmail and carrying a star-spangled shield with superpowers thanks to modern science. Kirby began drawing, and the two produced the first issue of their new book entirely on spec. And there you can see you have a knight, and you have the idea for the new hero. Timely loved the result. Captain America #1 appeared in December 1940, with the cover of the Captain socking Adolf Hitler in the jaw. The resulting comic sold almost 1 million copies, a stunning success by any measure. Clearly, America was more willing to fight if the sales figures were any indication than America first would admit. Not everyone was pleased. The German-American Bund sent Kirby hate mail inviting him to pick out any lamppost on Times Square so they could lynch him, while timely staff needed police protection thanks to phoned-in death threats. Kirby, who despised Nazis, was absolutely thrilled. Captain America was his way of portraying the times in the form of comic characters. They felt extremely patriotic despite the threats. And there are stories that one time they actually called his office and he said, "Oh, you're down in the lobby? Give me a minute, I'll be right there." And ran downstairs to fight them. Well, they left. But his faith, though, was in his new creation was justified. When America finally joined the war in 1941, Captain America was one of the most popular comics among draftees. As a later version of the character said, hope was as vital a component of the defense of the nation as blood and iron. Captain America was perfect for the times. This is the traditional origin of the character. Two immigrants creating a patriotic symbol of their adopted home to advocate for a cause. Closer analysis, however, hints at an older and more explicitly ethnic and medieval source for the sentiment of liberty. Whether they realized it or not, Simon and Kirby seem to have drawn upon the storehouse of cultural memory passed down from the age of chivalry and beyond. Certain medieval tropes in superheroes are obvious. Like knights errant, they are supposed to epitomize all that is good, such as protecting the innocent, defeating evil, and succoring the weak. Joe Simon was well aware of this when he literally cloaked Steve Rogers on the American flag, later admitting that his love of King Arthur had paid off. Remember that one? Here was a noble knight to face a modern evil, even if Timely had to give the captain a round shield instead of a heater to placate another comics company. As it turned out, the new bulletproof shield was an even better symbol of the indestructible American values. That its design, a 5-pointed star on a blue shield surrounded by red and white stripes, resembles the 6-pointed Mogan David or Seal of Solomon. May be coincidental, but it is striking that this traditionally symbolizes the strength of God's protection. Captain America may be a warrior for democracy, but it's no coincidence that his first opponent was the enemy of the Jews. The 5-pointed star also echoes the pentangle, or interlaced star in the shield worn by the title character in the 14th century poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The pentangle, described in the poem as the sign that Solomon set long since, is gold on red and symbolizes Gawain's prowess, keen senses, and Christian faith instead of patriotism. But it still calls to mind the captain's enhanced senses, unerring aim, and devotion to duty. That he has to teach these virtues to a squire-like sidekick, Bucky Barnes, only strengthens the similarity to an Arthurian hero. As much as the captain may resemble a knight in shining armor, however, another legend lurks behind the patriotic facade, the golem, or created man of Jewish folklore. Originally born of the wish for a protector who would defend the ghetto from persecution, the golem has always been a surprisingly malleable figure. The very word means shapeless matter, implying something to be reworked as needed, leading scholar Moshe Idel to argue for multiple golems rather than a single unchanged character. The first appearance of the word is in Psalm 139, 15-16, when Adam praises God for his undeveloped substance. This is followed by Talmudic references early in the Common Era to rabbis creating life from dust, followed by more extensive references in the Neo-Pythagorean work Sefer Yetzirah between the 3rd and 6th century. By the 12th century, Rabbi Eliezer of Worms was writing detailed instructions for creating a golem who dirt, then animating it by chanting in Hebrew, placing the name of God in its mouth, and inscribing the word emet, or truth, on its brow. The resulting behemoth would be the perfect defender of the ghetto. Its connection to the earth would grant it the power of foresight, while its existence as a soulless servant would warn against the danger of competing with God. This warning is too often necessary, for the golem has a tendency to turn on its creator. The only way to end such a rampage and return the golem to the dust from which it was made was to erase Aleph, the first letter of Emet, and change it to Met, or death. The best-known golem story features Rabbi Judith Lowe, the beloved Maharel of 16th century Prague. Rabbi Lowe, who lived during a brief golden age when Bohemian Jewry was relatively free from persecution, was devoted to rationalism and scholarship, and it is ironic that his name has become attached to the single most famous story of Jewish magic. That this occurred 3 centuries after his death is evidence of the power of folklore and an enthusiastic audience to shape cultural memory. Much American Jewish folklore originated, as one might expect, in the Yiddish-speaking communities of Europe, including the 1847 folktale collection, Sippurim, eine Sammlung jüdischer Volkssagen, which was the first reference to Rabbi Loeb having a golem. The story did not really enter popular culture, however, until 1909. This is when Yudel Rosenberg, a respected Polish rabbi and legal authority, published Niflaat Maharel im Ha-Golem, known in English as the Golem, or the Miraculous Deeds of Rabbi Leva. Rosenberg claimed his book was based on an account by Rabbi Loeb's son-in-law, but numerous anachronisms indicate that Rosenberg's account is fiction, most likely inspired by a revival of the infamous blood libel in 1899. The book quickly became a bestseller in a community hungry for a protector, and inspired an imitation by Chaim Bloch that was translated into English by the mid-1920s. But this book arrived just as its setting, the ancient ghetto of Prague, was being demolished in the name of urban renewal, is a fine example of cultural synchronicity, as the golem always seems to show up in times of social upheaval. Pogroms, the blood libel, war, to European Jewry soon to be faced by a madman, Yudel Rosenberg gave hope for a redeemer to lead them out of danger. Unfortunately, Gentiles appropriated the newly popular story almost at once, with mixed results. The two most important non-Jewish golem stories, Gustav Meyring's 1950 novel Der Golem, and Paul Wegener's 1920 film Der Golem, Wie in der Wie Welt kam, are problematic in their depiction of both medieval and modern Judaism. Meyring's text actually has little to do with the golem, as most of the narrative is a nightmarish depiction of 20th century alienation, rife with images of Jews as incestuous, ugly, parasitic foreigners living in a filthy slum. Wegener's film, while ostensibly about the Maharel, is so riddled with stereotypes about black magic and lustful Jewesses seducing Christian knights that the New York Times questioned whether it was based on Jewish legend at all. Even the animation ritual was wrong, since the word Shem is implanted behind a 5-pointed star in the creature's chest, not inscribed on its brow. French director Julien Duvivier's 1936 film, The Golem, The Legend of Prague, is a later, somewhat more positive take on the legend. Filmed in Prague, then dubbed into English, its tale of the Maharel's successor awakening a sleeping golem to overthrow the mad Emperor Rudolf was clearly intended as a response to Nazi aggression. The young rabbi tells his people that liberty will come if they stand fast, and his wife eventually activates the golem by writing, "Revolt is the right of slaves" on its forehead. This story of the golem as liberator is so similar to the impulse behind Captain America that one must ask if the connection is more than coincidental. Jack Kirby's rabbi later claimed that the golem was the archetypal story for the man, who connected it with the Jewish folktale's central theme of a hero created to protect the downtrodden and persecuted. And it is tempting to assume that he at least saw the Duvivier film during its New York City run in 1936. In spite of their flaws, and these books and films, as well as Rosenberg's tale, contain images similar to Captain America, as well as superheroes in general. Like Wegener's Golem, the captain wears a 5-pointed star on his chest, while the capital A on his helmet invariably recalls the aleph that differentiates truth from death on the golem's brow. Captain America does not wear a superhero's cape, Duvivier's golem does, along with a form-fitting costume that prefigures superheroic spandex. These are not the only echoes of Jewish life and culture seen in the captain. Like so many inner-city children, he is weak and sickly, and will transform into a powerful champion, thanks to a secret serum developed by a Jewish-American scientist modeled on Albert Einstein. That he is blonde, blue-eyed, and fair-skinned is a clear and pointed reference to the Nazi ideal of the golden-haired Aryan warrior. Few superhero comics survived the 1940s thanks to few years of juvenile delinquency. Captain America was not among them. Aside from a failed attempt to revive him as commie smasher in the 1950s, he disappeared until the superhero revival, about 10 years later. This was also the time when the first wave of Holocaust memoirs appeared, along with television shows and films depicting World War II. What better time to bring back a superhero from that storied era? Jack Kirby and Marvel editor Stan Lee were in the middle of planning just such a comeback when word came that President Kennedy was shot. Kirby and Lee were devastated. Grief at America's loss only heightened their belief that America once again needed a symbol of hope and patriotism. The newly formed Avengers then found Steve Rogers frozen in the Arctic like an ancient king, struck down at the moment of victory, and soon he was once again leading the fight. Now, however, the battle was against oppression, not a specific country. Although the Captain He never abandoned his Roosevelt-era belief that American exceptionalism could be a force for good. He was a defender only of the best, purest, most progressive version of the country, not a zealot who blindly supported whatever administration was in power. In short, a golem with the free will to define his own fate. Even during the turbulent 1960s, the newly revived character stayed true to his ideals. As Stan Lee wrote in 1971, he had become, quote, the realization of the hopes and dreams of all freedom-loving people everywhere, regardless of nationality. This theme continued over the next several decades. Writers came and went, but none tried to change the character in any fundamental way. Pushing the envelope was one thing, but simply ignoring what had gone before would not work. Steve Rogers remained a 1940s citizen soldier, not a non-veteran who'd been drafted into an unpopular police action. His background was fleshed out to include a pre-war stint in art school during the days when artist meant radical, but he was always a patriot, albeit one imbued with Roosevelt's four freedoms and the idealism of the Atlantic Charter, not the bitter disillusionment of the 1970s and 80s. Ignoring this context would strip him of meaning, and despite societal and political changes, this was simply not in the cards. In addition, the comic continued to explore Jewish themes, at least in the background. A notable example is a 1980s run where Steve Rogers rents an apartment from a Holocaust survivor he had saved from the death camps in the 1940s, then dates a Jewish woman whose ex-husband belonged to a militant pro-Israel group. Nowhere is this more striking than in the Civil War miniseries of the late 2000s. This critique of the post-9/11 USA Patriot Act pits the captain against a new law that would force all superheroes to register with the government, regardless of the danger to their families or their individual wishes. He points out that this is unpleasantly close to German efforts to register Jews and other undesirables during the Nazi regime, then goes underground to lead a resistance movement. The miniseries ends with him being assassinated as he's about to go on trial for defying the SHRA. So powerful was the image of America's champion, splattered on the steps of a courthouse, that Joe Simon told reporters he sat Shiva from his most famous creation. Of course, the captain wasn't really dead. We are talking about comic books here. And within a few years, he returned to his usual place as the ideological center of the Marvel Universe. He would be replaced by his wartime partner Bucky during his hiatus, then by modern partner the Falcon after losing his strength. He was still Simon and Kirby's symbol of hope and liberation. It is this history that made the sudden revelation. Steve Rogers was now an agent of the totalitarian group Hydra such a shock. Claims of the switch had been carefully planned by writer Nick Spencer, a keen student of contemporary politics, did little to douse the flames. Spencer's admission that obviously people aren't going to throw a party for Captain Hydra only made it worse, especially after he confessed to enjoying the outrage. I think it illuminates the character in a way that we've never seen before, he said, shrugging aside the optics of a legendary anti-fascist joining a fascist group just as a major American political party nominated a candidate prone to quasi-fascist rhetoric. Jewish readers refused to accept this, pointing out that Jack Kirby had been a faithful Jew his entire life, complete with a mezuzah on his door jamb and enormous pride in the state of Israel. He had an incredible sense of righteousness, according to his rabbi, and it is hard to believe that either he or Joe Simon would have approved of Spencer's plotline. Jewish fans also pointed out that anti-Semitism is scarcely a thing of the past, as Ken's paper also pointed out, and they accused Marvel of using the Holocaust and the war itself as simply as clickbait. Spencer's protest that this was simply a clever plot twist, nothing more, was denounced as an insensitive money grab that ignored Hydra's long history of evildoing and its Nazi connections. Even the near certainty that the captain was mind-controlled and would eventually revert to his old self did little to soften the impact of this strikingly tone-deaf development. Just as it seemed that the Star-Spangled Golem had been used to subvert everything his creators intended, however, it became clear that, once again, Captain America was more than just a comics character. Marvel's sales dropped nearly 6% after the hail heard around the world, while comic shop employees reported that appalled subscribers dropped not only Captain America Steve Rogers, but the entire comic line. The book crashed pretty hard, said one, and the adoption of Captain Hydra as a symbol by the newly prominent alt-right did not help. The backlash only accelerated after Inauguration Day in 2017. White supremacist Richard Spencer was punched on camera by an anarchist, which of course led to comparisons to the original comic cover art, a rash of editorials asking if it was ever acceptable to punch a Nazi, and at least 2 cartoons recasting Captain America as an anarchist. There was also criticism from the left for the violence of this, as you can see in this cartoon. You know, you'll only alienate moderate Nazis if you punch them. Nick Spencer put his foot in it again by tweeting after the anarchist punched the Nazi that, quote, cheering violence against speech, even of the most detestable, disgusting variety, is not a look that will age well, was scorned as betraying the spirit of a character created to punch Nazis, as well as accusations that Spencer might be sending out a dog whistle, so they all right. At the same time, Captain America suddenly emerged as a symbol of protest against the new administration. Joe Simon's granddaughter wrote eloquently of seeing participants at the Women's March in Boston on January 21st, raising the captain's shield on high to rally the crowd, adding that, quote, in this time of turmoil, it's clear the cap represents something much larger, something that means a nation. Another Simon relative, daughter Melissa Groban, pointed out that Captain America returns to his original purpose during times of crisis, just like the medieval golem stalking the streets of Prague. How this latest development in the saga of Captain America will end is unknown. Marvel, just 2 weeks ago, publicly begged its readers to allow the saga of Captain Hydra to play out before abandoning the book and their company, even as their sales continued to fall and their character suddenly appeared at protest marches as a symbol of liberation and resistance. It seems that once again, to quote my author Michael Chabon, the shaping of a golem is a gesture of hope offered against hope in a time of desperation, even though this time the golem is being directed not by its official controllers, but by the people it was made to defend. Moishe Eidel's statement about multiple golems has never been truer. Or as Joe Simon himself said when asked about the assassination of Steve Rogers at the end of Marvel's Civil War, it's a hell of a time for him to go. We really need him now. There's the alt-right's new hero. Or maybe not.
All right, now we are running late, so we need to move forward. Why don't you guys go ahead and hook up? Do you need to hook up the projector? I assume. All right. And as they're doing that.
PGA chord, 3. Fly my little friend, be free.
Okay. Oh. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for our third paper today, I would like to introduce Nathan Clow of the University of Minnesota Duluth and Brandon Vogt, Nova Classical Academy. And the title of their paper is Civilizational Discourse and the Politics of Embodiment in Contemporary Historical European Martial Arts.
Hi everybody, sorry we're late. Our flight got canceled, and then as a geographer I have no excuse, but I didn't realize that this was a different time zone. We still got 15 minutes. So yeah, Nathan Clough, Assistant Professor of Geography at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and I study cultural geography. I'm really interested in the idea of Western civilization as part of the contemporary politics of the United States and of Europe, and the way that the idea of the West is essentially utilized as a tool to create power from various kinds of groups. So today we're looking at some of the same material that Ken has talked about. Actually, when he posted his first initial talk that caused this big furor, right? My immediate thought was, Ken, you've coined a new qualitative methodology, trolling for trolls. So, the way this is going to work is I'm just going to talk a little bit about our kind of methodology and theoretical framework, and then Brandon Vogt, my colleague and fencing coach, is going to talk about various ways that a more progressive kind of community can be built around HEMA. Right? So our talks really go together pretty well here. our basic research question, right? The basic thing that we're trying to delve into is how does the contemporary construction of the affective structures of human negotiate the historical and contemporary axes of power present in the concept of Europeanness? Or in other words, how does the physical act of doing reconstructive swordsmanship together create communities that can either operate in reactionary or progressive ways? I'll put it in postmodern, because you know. Right? So, HEMA, as you've all heard about today, is it's essentially a movement to reconstruct historical European forms of martial arts from a bunch of books, right? And some extent remnants of traditions like wrestling and fencing and boxing that all have some relevance to this, right? It's about creating a way of operating in the world as a set of embodied subjects, right? To do a martial art is to control both your thought and your body in order to increase your power to achieve some kind of goals through violence. Now, martial arts are always part of the societies that they emerge in. Right? They cannot be separated from the context in which they're founded and in which they're utilized. This was true in the past. Right? Filippo Vanni's grasped the sword manfully, for as a cross and a royal weapon should set off everybody's intersectionality buzzers. Right? Manfully, it's gendered, it's a cross, it's religious, and it's royal, it's classed. Right? The chivalric tradition of this martial form was part of a power structure. Right? It was a power structure that essentially defended a system of class, gender, and religious supremacy within Europe. It wasn't only that. It wasn't only that, but it was that as well. Today, we also have a set of societal structures that are part of human. It cannot be separate from the society that we're a part of. Right? So in setting up this academic study, I mean, mostly there was a Groupon for medieval sword fighting, and I saw it like 3 years ago, and I was like, yes, I'm on it. And pretty much immediately I was like, oh, wow, I can study this, it's awesome. Right? So I'm interested in the social context. A couple of theoretical moves here just to put together some language. I'm really interested in affect studies. In geography, there's been an affective turn, much like the other social sciences. Right? Anthropology, sociology, history as well. That's interested in thinking about affect not just as physical embodiment, but actually through a kind of a Marxian Spinozan register that sees affect as essentially the pursuit of combinations, physical and mental combinations, that allow change to be made in the world. If anyone's interested in this trajectory, I'll talk your ear off over a beer or mead or whatever. Essentially, it comes out of Antonio Negri's engagement with Spinoza and Descartes. And we're also connected with a new wave of carnal sociology and the sociology of sport. So Luc Wacant, a sociologist, wrote a fantastic book about an ethnography of boxing in inner city Chicago. It was a fantastic book about race and embodiment and masculinity and violence and subversion of white supremacy and all kinds of stuff. So I'm interested in utilizing these kinds of concepts. Wacant especially draws on his advisor Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus to think about how a martial tradition builds communities of power. And says the conditionings associated with a particular class of conditions of existence produce habitus, systems of durable, transposable dispositions, structured structures predisposed to function as structuring structures. Pierre Bourdieu is French. But the important point here is that dispositions and cultures, essentially ways of being, are acquired socially through physical practice. And practical mastery operates both at a conscious level and below a conscious level. Right? Things affect us before we can think them, which means that habitus is the result of a pedagogy. A pedagogical work, therefore it's political and it can be changed. What time do we end, just so I know?
We should end at 5.
Oh, wait, it's nothing yet.
Okay.
Not that point.
Yeah, we started a few minutes late too.
We did.
Okay.
Except in period.
We're doing fine for 3 papers.
Okay, cool. So, affect and habitus operate together in the construction of communities and of action. Now, what becomes interesting here is that we have a martial art that was dead, right? A system of affective interaction and of attitudes and pre-attitudinal dispositions that have to be remade from books. And so they're remade through a kind of conscious practice that actually spans continents. Right? Ken's talked about the way that this practice is being distributed through the internet around the world as people try and figure out what exactly are appropriate and effective ways to do martial arts, and what exactly is the place of a chivalric tradition in a contemporary reconstruction of this art. And it's important that it's not reenactment. Right? It's not pretending to be something in order to learn about it, right? To do a martial art, you have to be it, right? Or else you're not actually doing a martial art. And otherwise, you're going through some kind of emotion. And so you have to have it precognitively built into yourself, into your identity and into your relationships. So here we have just some of these. You can't talk about HEMA without putting up some awesome medieval plates, right? Talhofer and various folks.
Same one.
The same fun, right? The same fun. Now, this is brought up because it's circulated popularly. It's right here in the conceptualization of everyone who does HEMA that HEMA is potentially problematic. Right? Everyone knows that. That's why there are so many fights about it. Precisely because it's been historically recuperated in the pursuit of white supremacy and genocide. Right? Hitler, wearing a high Gothic harness, is explicitly drawing the history of chivalry into the present moment of racial genocide. Right? It can't be taken outside of it. But that's not all of it there is either. Right? So I just have a few quotes here, also, of course, from Stormfront. And you've got, research has gotten so easy with neo-Nazis posting stuff online.
It does speed things up.
Yeah. So this is just, I'm not going to read you this whole thing, but essentially there's this guy who calls himself Paladin who's posting on this white supremacist website saying, wow, I'm so glad I found this website because I'm really into my heritage. I think blonde women are awesome, and I really want to engage with my past. Right? It's great. And other guys are saying, welcome, Paladin. In the wake of the failed multicultural movement, which I think is waning in power, it's so refreshing to see European young blood rise up and let voices be heard. Not to mention, proud of our heritage and ancestry, to which our accomplishments written on a scroll would stretch out beyond the length of a football field. One day, young Aryan brother, near to your golden years, blah, blah, blah. Another guy chimes in, come in peace, friend, as a practitioner of HEMA and HES. Myself, I can understand your enthusiasm. I find the European martial tradition much more fulfilling, culturally enriching than my experience with Oriental martial arts. So here comes my geographic interest. The Orient and the Occident are rather geographic ideas. Right? So, all of these attempts at kind of reinvigorating these arts have to deal with this narrative tradition that Ken was talking about too. This idea that there was a previous masculinity that was pure, that was an idealized knight, that was white, and whose virility has passed from the world. Right? It has to be recaptured, re-brought in through a reclaiming of these arts. It's anti-Semitic, it's anti-feminist. Here we have Richard Cooper's Historical Introduction to a Knight's Own Book of Chivalry. It says, here again, honor is found in a balance between the brutal and the moral, the ethical and the civilized. The modern gender-neutral, egalitarian usage of honor is ahistorical and essentially meaningless. This feel-good, universally attainable honor loosed from the metaphor of manly endeavor in combat, becomes a vague sense of positive feelings and associations, and over it is completely subjective, warm, fuzzy. Of course, using the name of one of the most influential black women in the world is derogatory, right, in this kind of context.
Not to mention transactional analysis.
Right. Right, so there's this idea that we need to reclaim this Western tradition. Just going to go through this a little bit quickly. This, in the Journal of Western Martial Arts, is a definition of what Western is, as clearly set up against the Oriental. Right? What makes it Western is that it's the opposite of the Oriental. The Occidental is the rational, the scientific, the good, the virtuous, the manly. The Oriental is, as Edward Said told us so beautifully, the mirror opposite of everything that white men want to think that they are. Right? So we immediately have an appeal to the Orient here. We also have an engagement with neo-Nazis with the idea of heritage. Right? Personally, I'd rather train in Krav Maga than Kung Fu or any Asian martial art. I spent 24 years studying religious philosophy. I had enough of it. There's no silly stuff to learn. You just have to learn to survive. In the West, right, we have this idea of martialness that's different. If you want to cut to the chase in the West, Christianity was our dough. So we felt the need, desire to take up a ma. We merely needed the jutsu. We just felt the practical need to make our lives some martial art training, not to make martial art training our lives. And it's one of the reasons the West took off in productivity. The printing press freed God's word, the Bible from the confines of third engaged masses. We had a solid philosophical and theological basis for our lives, and that helped us keep the things in life in perspectives, which started the Renaissance, not Italians carving nude ladies. Finally, Radix Journal is the journal of the National Policy Institute. The National Policy Institute is Richard Spencer's white supremacist think tank. So if you look up Radix, R-A-D-I-X, you get a whole bunch of articles, and one of them is called Reclaiming the Way of the Sword, in the first issue. It's an explicit white nationalist argument that engaging with HEMA is the ideal route to reclaim an authentic Western masculinity that is freed from the restrictions of white, modern, bourgeois liberalism. They also quote Jack Donovan extensively in his critique of a mercantilist mindset instead of a warrior mindset, which is clearly anti-Semitism. Right? When he says mercantilist, he's talking about Jews, right, in this context. Right? They want to rebuild the noble spirit of the Grail sagas and create, from the dust, a community of white warrior men operating through a chivalric ideal to overturn feminism and reinstate an imagined perfect period of Western Christian patriarchal agenda. Right? And HEMA is the route to that because of the habitus it offers. The full way of life, connecting them to other warriors through this affective struggle. And so now, Brandon is going to tell you about some of the progressive ways, instead, that these communities in this pursuit can be pulled through and that are actually happening. Talk about affective awareness. Yeah,
I would call
exactly.
it tripping on a cord.
Tripping on a cord. Let's see if that comes back up. The rest is nice.
So, how do you create a unifying praxis? Like, that's the thing. And I have some interesting insight on this, I think. I've been a fencing coach for a really long time. I had the good fortune to have been raised in a SAL with a really long tradition that is kind of unusual among fencing schools. The guy that was my coach, his name was Rich Jacobson. He studied at Salsa and Telly when he was young. He was brought into his club as a young man. He's Jewish and not wealthy at all. And his coach gave him the opportunity to learn an art that was in many ways elitist. And I think one thing that's true about sword arts traditionally, especially Western fencing, is it tends to be something that's the it's kind of under the ownership of the elite and the white and the upper class. So there are a few different ways that that is currently being kind of dealt with or broken as a norm. So one thing to think about, I think, moving forward, and it's part of the discussion that we're all having with KEMA, is this, right? There are actually 3 ways that this can play out. People's clubs are either racist or fascist, basically, or they're very race and gender neutral. They say, well, we don't see color, we don't see gender inequality, as we just don't talk about it at all. And then there are clubs that are purposely going out of the way to be diverse and to invite people from all different social statuses and backgrounds. There are a number of clubs, there are a number of organizations now in Europe, Fighters Against Racism, which Ken mentioned earlier, as well, who are reaching out to people from other ethnicities, to immigrant populations, specifically to women, and they're giving a safe space for people to train together, which I think is very useful. Another good example of this, kind of famously, is Peter Westbrook, who you may remember from the 80s. He was the first American to win a gold medal in the Olympics for a really long time. He was a half Japanese and half African-American man from New York. And what he did after he fenced for a while, he actually opened up a fund so that he could give at-risk youth from inner city New York the opportunity to learn some discipline and academic skills, learn how to fence, and so they could kind of continue on a tradition that, again, had been closed to them historically, but now was funded for them. So when Nathan and I began talking about this about a year ago, I realized that the club where I work is in a really, really great position to participate in this discussion, because first of all, we have a lot of people, and historically, our club's been around for a long time, since the early 80s. It has always actually been a very diverse place. In fact, one of the things that's most telling, I think, is the fact that a lot of the people that I fence with now, I was fencing with in 1984, and a lot of them who were kids when I was a kid are now on the coaching staff. It's a staff that's both racially diverse and diverse in terms of gender, and probably most telling, it's another opportunity for people of that were at risk as kids to get a break out of poverty. I would say almost the entire coaching staff there were troubled, disadvantaged youths, and our boss picked us up, gave us a place to go every day where people were expecting to see us, and we were being forced to work very hard. So what this does is it creates an environment where potentially we can decide to create an effective state, a unifying praxis where people of different races, different cultures, different genders can come together, and through hard work and through kind of a standardized, unified way of looking at training, they can become a group that's cohesive and really a community. Probably the best example of this, I think, is a young coach that we have. Her name is Lisa, who's in her early 20s now. She's been at the club since she was 12 and was very quiet and very physically weak. Through training with us, she's eventually become in charge of the beginner program that we have for HEMA, and she is at the forefront of bringing more women into our group because she's a really excellent role model. She's become very physically strong. We were talking this morning about the fact that she can deadlift her boyfriend, and she can do pull-ups, which quite a few of them, which is the exception certainly. And she is no longer quiet and reserved. She feels confident. She knows what she's talking about because she's been raised up in the system. And so it gives her the opportunity to attract more women into our group and actually teach them that they can become strong and competent through the pedagogies that we use.
Moving forward one more slide. So, in conclusion here, a few thoughts. HEMA's not racist, right? HEMA's not a thing that could be racist. It's a whole bunch of various communities and aspects of it are quite attractive to white supremacists. But it's also a social field of struggle, just like it has always been. Right? During the 15th century, it was a field of social struggle. And when we had burghers learning how to fight with swords, when we had Joan of Arc, right? When we had all the witch burnings and the pushback to gender rights, there was all kinds of social struggle at the time. So it is also a site of progressive building of community and of the ability to express power as progressives. Right? Being strong and knowing how to physically support yourself is empowering, and it is positively good for all kinds of communities who are engaging in a struggle against white supremacy and racism. And so there's one couple more brief comments if anything you want to make in conclusion.
Yeah, so I think the end of the conversation is this. I think we're at a point in time where we have a great opportunity as martial artists to decide that we are going to frame the conversation in a progressive way. There are certainly a lot of people that are looking to charge HEMA in a negative way and make it very much the realm of the fascists. There are lots of people that are writing articles on it. There are lots of people that are in communication. It would be easy for us to let them define what the conversation is. But I think there are way more people in the HEMA community. Most of the people that I've met are very progressive, very interested in having a diverse body of people joining us. And it's not something that is past our powers to change, right? We can decide to do things that create a diverse community in HEMA. So there's a few things that I think we have looked at as a group. First of all, our group is affiliated with Fighters Against Racism, and the coaches that I work with wear t-shirts and go around and we talk to people about the fact that everybody is welcome in our group. If somebody comes into our cell that is a stranger that we don't know, regardless of what their race or social status is, coaches go and talk to them and welcome them in, invite them to participate in class. Doing outreach and just letting people know that they're all welcome in our space. If we all do that as a group, that allows us to frame the discussion. It allows us to be the ones that are being listened to and create the culture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, since we don't have a lot of time, I have a few things I wrote down, but I can talk privately with people. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience for any of our four presenters, and see if you guys have any insights or things you'd like clarified. Yes?
Okay, heretic speaking here. As Ken knows, I have been coming to these sessions for a long time, and I've seen a lot of demonstrations of European martial arts. But as somebody who spent a decade and a half or something like that studying Japanese martial arts, Oriental martial arts, not that I was ever very good, but I mean I did it for a long time and I learned a lot about different styles. Every time I've seen a demonstration, I have seen similarities. It's, oh, that looks like something you could do, that I learned how to do when I was in better shape. At karate camp or something like that. And it's not that different. That's why I say heritage speak. It's not that different. You have swords in European and Japanese martial arts too, although my kendo sword is wooden.
I think there are some differences. I mean, certainly,
Oh, yeah,
if you look at the techniques, if you were to look at a bunch of, if you were to take all of the plays from the different manuscripts in the Lishi tradition, for example, you'd see a lot of positions that you still see in modern Kenjutsu. There are simply kind of a limited number of things that you can do with a sword, but the way it's played isn't necessarily the same, right? I think a lot of Japanese arts can become almost kind of museum culture-ish. When I was a boy, I studied Yai, and Nathan and I were talking about that this morning. The goal in that training is to be as much like your sensei as you possibly can, and that was, we were very aware of that as a boy. Like, I want to look like him. I'm going to move like him. My cuts are going to be like, I want my sword to make the same noise. And that doesn't necessarily exist in most of the human groups that I've had experience with, right? A lot of it has to do with creative, probably to some extent because we're trying to figure it out, right?
Some collaborative interpretation.
Yeah, there's a lot of collaboration and experimentation and empirical evidence gathering, and then some amount of inductive reasoning that goes into it. It's very much not just let me make it exactly like my instructor is doing it.
I would say also that Western fencing, if you look at the substance of it, it is theorized very differently, and it is also much more heavily theorized, and it emphasizes the difference between giving someone a fencing lesson, one is a coach, and learning via kata. To ignore these and another a vast amount of other differences is to say, well, the cultures are essentially the same. It's not so. The cultures are very different, and as a result of practice, in pedagogy and the habitus are very, very different.
Richard.
Sort of building on that, actually, there's, I think, value in looking at the way Eastern martial arts also are situated, of course, in the culture. And I'm thinking now about the 50s and the sort of adoption of Eastern martial arts by American, African-American youth as an empowering and a very American thing to do, which is sort of odd on the face of it, but became a very American thing. And I wonder if you could talk like those pieces together.
I think that we actually had a lot of slides in about like blaxploitation and kung fu, right, and Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee, right, and we were talking about capoeira today as an anti-colonial, anti-racist art at its core. Right? It doesn't mean it can't be used for racist stuff, right? But it means there's a habitus built around it that's a habitus of resistance, which I think we have a lot to learn from. But certainly, it's always part of social studies.
You'll have to wait for our next meeting for that.
I look forward to it.
You have your hand up.
I was going to ask, I know practically nothing about HEMA. How soft can it be as a martial art?
What do you mean by soft?
Sort of using the energy of your attacker against yourself, against them.
So the concept of fueling, which is something that a lot of the groups talk about, it's very, conceptually, it's the same thing that really good high-level Tai Chi practitioners are using and really high-level Aikido practitioners are using. The concept of hard defeating soft and soft defeating hard is something that's it's necessary to fight with swords well. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where both people are hard with each other's swords and they both realize it's a mistake, they both let go, they both hit. Or they both come together and they're both soft and they both realize that they've made a mistake and they both hit. And so learning that kind of sensitivity is a huge part of the art. With that said, to say that it's a soft art is not accurate, because it's a split second in time where you're sensing someone's energy, but it's not flowy like Tai Chi.
Yeah, even if I can jump in for a second, right? In a real simple demonstration of where in Aikido, if someone attacks, you may step aside and use their energy against them. If I look at the wrestling in Ju or in Fiore, which are the two big sources, or not Fiore, Fiore, the two big sources of wrestling that you run into, there's almost none of that I've seen anyway. I mean, it's strength based and primarily leverage based. I mean, Fiore is really leverage based wrestling, but it's not. I don't think there's that give, that flow like water and give to your opponent that is so important in Tai Chi and Aikido. I mean, there are points where you press against your opponent, you let your opponent press against you, and you use that against him, but it's not on the same sort of thing that I, as you know, somebody who started out high school wrestling, really recognize.
I just asked because the martial arts I'm part of, one of the things that helps us recruit, especially women basically, is the fact we emphasise it's a softer martial art, which I, as a tall, strong guy, find extremely frustrating at times. But it helps if you can so in terms of recruiting a diverse population.
Well, here's the thing: is that there's eternal debate in HEMA too, especially around women's tournaments. Should there even be women's tournaments? And there's been arguments from both sides. Women saying, well, there shouldn't be because, you know, that's putting us in a lesser place and skill can overcome strength. And then other people saying, well, there should be, but women can also enter, you know, open tournaments and things like that. The fact of the matter is, if you look at any combat sport, there are age, weight, and gender divisions, and they're there for a reason. And we're talking here about competitive combat sports, not something that Aikido is, you know, mostly non-competitive. So, in terms of, so what this really comes down to, I think, your subtext here is how welcoming is the actual practice? How difficult is the actual practice for women, for smaller people? To which I'll say, well, everything's a bell curve, right? Women, in terms of strength and speed, certainly I've had my ass handed to me by women on occasions. But overall, if we're talking about the averages and the percentages, men who are larger and stronger are going to have a competitive advantage, especially the way longsword, the primary competitive weapon, is played these days, which is very much an aggression, speed, and strength game. Which isn't to say there aren't excellent women fencers, but then again, you know, I have students who are just practicing, right? How are you going to define success? Are you going to define success as them improving their skill and themselves as people, or are we going to be like, you know, are we going to be like college sport fencing coaches, or we're just going to recruit guys who are going to, you know, who are already the A-graded fencers in high school? Does that make sense?
Yeah, another piece of that too that we forget about often, because HEMA has become a sport and a lot of people are getting into it just because it's a sport. Live weapons change things very quickly, right? And if you have a woman that is physically competent, good speed and like strength to weight ratio, and they have a sharp sword, that suddenly strength is less of an issue. It's different when you're going to go and fight rounds against someone that's big and going fast. People go faster and are more aggressive than they would be if they were using real weapons. And it's so that's a conversation that is difficult. You know,
you can have blow special and free play that's either safe or accurate, but not both.
Yeah.
So and I think you want to say something too, but I'll do a quick anecdote. Perica, everyone knows Perica, she is tiny. She is a tiny. Was it Perica? No, it was Lauren. I'm sorry, it wasn't Perica. It was Lauren. Lauren's also extremely tiny, and she beat me at the little Frisbees tournament in New Hampshire in like the semi-final because we were doing it to like one hit. So like I made a mistake and she got me. Right now, had we had multiple goes, I would have overwhelmed her because I'm twice her size and can bench press 8 of her. But she, you know, she beat me, and rightly so. She got me. And I was like, I had a moment of crap before she hit me, and I was out. So that
again, if the sword was sharp, It's really the first one that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, hopefully,
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah. You had a statement or a question or a point or a...
Oh, yeah. Do we have time?
Last one. We're a little after. We did start late, so last
Okay.
one.
So I'm kind of interested in this, the sort of, it seems to me that there's kind of a contradiction between the idea that HEMA is a habitus that is rooted in its social cultural kind of, and it means something only within its context, right? And the assertion that HEMA isn't racist. If we acknowledge that HEMA is coming out of a medieval society and it's coming out of a specifically militaristic situation where the goal is to kill other people who, specifically in this case, are of a different race and religion, I guess how are HEMA practitioners and HEMA scholars dealing with the problem that one of the reasons that it's so attractive to white supremacists is it's coming out of this situation, and how do we deal with saying, okay, there are values that we can pull out of that situation that are progressive and important and that we can reconcile with a progressive, diverse, world that we want to inhabit?
I have two really good answers.
Great.
And then hopefully you guys have some more really good answers. I'm going to be really brief about this.
Get comfortable because this one's going to take right now.
The first thing, I mean, this is obviously going to go Russell. The first thing is that that's not necessarily the context, because what we're doing is a 21st century recreation of a 16th century idea of a 14th century thing. And in the 16th century, it's not necessarily the knightly class practicing this. It's a sport fencing tradition amongst journeymen in the free cities of the Holy Roman Empire as a statement of enfranchisement, people who were kept down, and they're claiming the sword. And historically, there's a long, long tradition of people, I'm thinking Jean-Louis, I'm thinking Chevalier St. George, of people who were both of Haitian descent and French, claiming the sword as a symbol of enfranchisement. So there's a long, long history of taking that. And I guess that's also segues into the second part of my answer, which is that these are symbols, and symbols are neutral, right? Symbols are something that can be claimed. This is a ground that can be taken and can be claimed. And just as it can be claimed for right-wing neo-fascist things, we can claim it for our purposes as well. And it's and as used to be the case, it's an extremely this image is an extremely powerful symbol.
Yeah. Also, something you said something about a martial art invented, to be put, basically the whole crusader motif. There were crusades against, there were crusades by Europeans against Europeans. Look what happened to the Cathars. And look at all the mercenaries, the condottieri in Italy. They were fighting each other.
I got something to add to that. This is the point that I wanted to make, which is that it's a mistake to think that European martial arts in the context of the 14th and 15th century were created to go out and destroy the other. They were not. They were practiced within the community for people of the same community to kill each other. Right? The fashion poker that we have...
That's a value we can all get behind.
The fashion poker that we have were primarily designed to teach people not to go out and make war, but to fight duels with other members of their community.
It also will work with religion. I mean, this is right smack dab in the middle of the fighting between the Protestants and the Catholics, right? And that's a lot of the context right there, right? So it's people in a chartered city preparing to go to war potentially with the chartered city next door over the lines of religion.
2 seconds.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, that sounds like the Hanseatic League versus the Teutonic Knights.
Yeah.
Right?
In a grudge match in a steel cage with a chair.
So the way that we negotiate this fraught history is precisely through having these giant Facebook fights and these kinds of things. But it's a sign, right? The fact that hundreds of people across different countries pile in at the faintest hint that there's a discussion about racism means that it's right at the top of everyone's minds. Right? So it's being negotiated as we speak across these groups.
And on that, I think that's a wonderful note to end upon. Thank you all very much. We'll see you at next Kalamazoo.
I am not really happy with the way that worked out. Thank you so much.
I have one Wait. How much is that armor you were wearing?
Oh, now you go.
Well, this company's not just.
Think of the horse, come on.
Yeah, well, that's the horse, it wasn't the arrow was.
She.
I'm glad you made it, I'm glad you're here.
Exactly.
Really worried.